You're listening to Greater Good Radio Hawaii. Please visit us online at greatergoodradio.com. Today's guest is John Webster, director of the Hogan Entrepreneurial Program at Chaminade University. In 2005, John contributed in elevating the condition of Hawaii's homeless by writing and distributing a 12-page brochure encouraging Hawaii businesses to hire homeless workers. John, could you tell us a little bit about this brochure, this 12-page brochure encouraging businesses to hire homeless?
Yeah, Carrie. I think perhaps you've seen some of our material, but one of the things we say about the Hogan program is that we're doing business things that make social sense and social things that make business sense. And so, as we said at the beginning of the program, we're really trying to address serious business activity and serious social activity and make sure they both relate to one another. And so the homeless brochure you allude to is an example of that. Thanks to the generosity of the Hogan Foundation and the Hogan family, we're able to engage in some things other than just classroom work. I had been at a meeting of the Chamber of Commerce when Governor Lingle chose to use her time before about 1,000 people to talk about the homeless issue. And I can remember going back to my office after that saying, my God, she could have been talking about a lot of economic issues, but she chose the homeless issue. I found that quite interesting and used that as an opportunity to say, why don't we get engaged in our program? Because our students have to do 25 hours of community service each year. That's a fundamental requirement in the program. And as I say, many of them instinctively are already tuned to the notion of wanting to engage in social policy activities. And so the notion was, we could only do something modest, of course. But if the labor market was getting short and if the economy was on the upswing as it was this 2 years ago, the idea of giving a brochure to business that would help them hire the homeless, not only prod them, but give them some of the information they need relative to benefits derived, et cetera, on how to get that job done. So we put out this little modest brochure that you alluded to, sent it out to 1,100 small businesses and said, if you're inclined, we'd certainly encourage you to read this and hire the homeless. But then we went out and we brought the homeless in, and we had a young man working with us, a man named Sam Edwards, who is a counselor to homeless veterans. And we went out to the beaches and rounded up homeless people and brought them on a Saturday morning. And we had our students and Sam Edwards working with those people from the beaches to help develop some interview and grooming skills. And while there, we had a student work with them and we wrote their resumes. While there, we took their pictures. And then we gave them a little portfolio to carry it in, and we gave them 20 copies of a new resume. Now, this was a small group. First time, 5 students from the beach. But these homeless people literally lived on the beach. So we gave them 20 copies of their resume. But more importantly, we then sent that resume out to all the businesses on our 1,100 list that had zip codes in the Y&I area where they happened to be coming from. And I'm pleased to say that we think all 5 of them are employed. Certainly we know that 4 of them are. And one of our I didn't mention earlier, but related to this, we have about 35 members of a very distinguished advisory board. Some of them are people you've already had on your program. And one of them is Lane Muralco, the head of Big City Diner. Lane has hired at least 2 of the homeless people that we're talking about. And so it's just exciting to see that happening. As soon as we kick off this new academic year, we're going to try to bring in more, maybe about 20. We're using the same young man to pull them together, this time probably from the Waikiki area, and engage the students in training them. So it's just a wonderful activity. The students have fully endorsed that and enjoyed being part of that.
Are you able to give our listeners any advice of, as you said, your mantra of business and social responsibility working hand in hand for both to be successful? Could you give us some advice why?
Well, from a career of having worked in these areas and having studied these areas, going back to my early academic work at my PhD, I've obviously followed this quite closely. I wish I could give you lots of hard data. I can't. But for sure, the data that exists and the testimony that exists suggests that over the long haul, the companies that are socially responsible and that are truly engaged in social activity are the ones that survive. And I do believe that. I say the hard data is a little difficult to demonstrate, and as I always talk to my students when I teach business ethics and related topics, one doesn't have to be ethical to make money, but I like to think that one has to be ethical to stay in business over the long haul and to provide goods and services that its various constituents really expect and demand. And so through this program, we're just trying to take one small group of students and make sure they don't forget that lesson as they leave one small school called Chaminade. And that's really what we're trying to do. We also have a business plan competition for the nonprofit sector. Now, again, not because we're only focused on nonprofit, but again, because of our mantra here and because of the fact that the University of Hawaii already had a very good business plan competition in the for-profit area. So we thought maybe we could pave some new ground. At the time we offered our first business plan competition, we were only aware of Yale having run a similar competition. And so we did it. We had, first time around, we had almost 100 nonprofits submit. Our winner won $15,000. Bank of Hawaii endorsed it with us. It was a Bank of Hawaii Hogan plan. They went on to compete in the Yale competition, came in second place, and won another $20,000.
Thanks for joining us today on Greater Good Radio. For more information or a transcript of today's show, please visit us online at greatergoodradio.com. This is your host, Evan Leong and Carrie Leong, saying please join us next time for another episode of Greater Good Radio, Hawaii.